About a year ago, I put out a video that was focusing on the gas mileage of the 2023 Kia Sportage Hybrid, its limitations, tips for improving that. But today I'm coming at you with a little different video. This is my 50,000 mile review of this car. I'm not paid by anybody to say good things about it, so I'm happy to tear this thing to shreds if the details call for it. Generally speaking, I've really liked this car. I've driven it for over a year. As I've said, I've really close to 50,000 miles. That's why I'm doing this review. I've spent a lot of time in it, interstate, city, dirt roads, boat ramps, snow, all these different conditions that maybe a whole lot of drivers don't put this car through. So I think I've got a pretty good idea of the pros and cons of this car. So we're gonna go ahead and get into it. And just the first thing that I noticed and that I like about this car is when I first get into it and kick the car on, oftentimes the engine does not start right away. And I like that if you're just sitting there, you're idling, you're getting your things together, that's a nice feature. But one thing I have noticed in the cold, especially if you're gonna run the heat or something straight off, the engine will kick on, but as you go on your initial takeoff, it's actually going to use the electric system to power the car, and it's going to give the car a solid 30 seconds to a minute to actually warm up. So if you look at the RPMs, they're going to be locked in right around 1.5, but you're accelerating, you're using the car, and they remain the same. So the car is actually using its electric system to drive the car while the engine warms up a little bit. Most manufacturers recommend, that you start the car and let it run for 30 seconds to a minute before you take off. That you don't have to worry about at all in this car because it basically does it for you and has that protection system built in. So speaking of taking off, sometimes you are going to start your journey by going in reverse and you're going to notice a beep. So I'm going to give you guys a clip of that here. That reverse beep is obviously a safety feature to let people know that, hey, I'm backing out, watch out. However, this is not a Mack truck. This is not a moving truck. This is not a semi. I don't really think that it's necessary. I'm not sure if they did that because of the kind of the quiet associated with this car, associated with its hybrid electric feature, but it's something that definitely draws attention to you as you're pulling in and out of places. You don't always want that attention, and to me it's kind of annoying to have people turn around and looking at you and be like, wow, that's annoying. I'm glad I don't have that feature on my car, but luckily I do. So if you're super worried about running over grandmothers in their wheelchair in the parking lot and letting them know that you're coming, maybe you like that. To me, I actually looked into finding which fuse that was connected to and removing the fuse, but I couldn't find something that only controlled that, so I'm not about to start pulling fuses when different features may be linked to the same fuse. But anyway, that's annoying. That is definitely one thumbs down that I'm giving this car, but it's got a lot of other things that make up for it, so let's go ahead and get into those as well. Let's just jump to my thoughts about the interior, the infotainment system, the seats. The seats in the EX are nothing special, but for me, they provide enough lumbar support to be comfortable on long drives. Now, if you're sitting for 6-7 hours at a time, obviously you're gonna need to get out and stretch regardless of your seat. But I've made some pretty long journeys in this vehicle and I really haven't experienced too much discomfort. One thing that I really like about the seats in this version is that they are heated. I didn't have heated seats coming from my previous car. It's something that definitely helps take that edge off in the morning when it's 10 degrees outside. You've got a little while before the car actually warms up and is ready to start pumping some heat. So that's a feature that I love. Probably won't be buying a car without that feature in the future. Moving forward from there, one thing I like about the dashboard is that it has actual buttons. It's not all touchscreen. If you look at the higher trim models of this car, they go to all touchscreen for your heating and air conditioning, for who knows what. Frankly, I hate that. I wish car manufacturers would learn that people want simple cars. We don't want computers in every single item that we touch in a car. So I am very thankful that I have my AC and heat controls, actual push buttons. Now the infotainment itself is more of a touchscreen setup, but I use that very little while I'm driving. It's got voice commands. You put on Spotify, whatever, using Android Auto, which is wireless, by the way, in this trim, and I'm pretty happy. So apart from the heating and air conditioning, the other buttons you're going to be using are the heated seats, and then you have this rotary shifter. I absolutely hate the rotary shifter with the park button in the middle. I always have those intrusive thoughts. what happens when I press the park button and I'm going 30 mile an hour down the road. If that does get pushed, is it going to like just refuse the function, or is it actually going to engage and ruin my transmission? In any case, I don't really like pressing park. I'd much rather have a gear shifter or some other system. This is not my favorite, especially when switching from like drive to neutral. You oftentimes have to like press down on the brake. This is kind of annoying, but it's a small consideration. When I'm in neutral in a car wash and I am ready to put it back into drive, even if you're going at a really low speed or just getting pushed along, it does not let you put it into drive without pressing down on the brake pedal. To me, that's bothersome, but again, I was coming from a 6-speed manual where I could kind of manipulate my gear shifting a little bit better than this car. It's not a deal breaker for me, but it's definitely a feature of this car that I do not enjoy and won't learn to enjoy anytime soon in the future. All right, let's continue on with the interior. There's not a whole lot more to say about like the infotainment system in the dash. I do like the digital kind of reading on your speed and RPMs. I think that's kind of cool. So let's go to the back seat. Nothing really special about the back seat. It does have air, so based on whatever you're doing in the front with air conditioning or heat, that's going to be pushed through some vents in the back. The back seat itself is nothing special. Like I said, it has enough space for people, has enough space for things. What I really like about the interior of this car is when you fold those back seats down, how much space you have in the cargo area and then in the rear passenger area. When those two spaces are combined, you can definitely lay down. You can put all sorts of gear. I've shown this in some of my other videos, so go back to my playlist and check that out if you're curious how much stuff you can put in there. For like car camping, for long trips, when you have a bunch of gear in the back, this car really excels in internal space. I love it. I love it. I love it. I chose this car actually over a truck. I actually bought a Ford Maverick on order, waited 2 years for it, a hybrid, and really when it came down to it, I still got the truck, but I wanted to see how it matched up against this car. So I drove it to work a couple times. I thought about it. I looked at the space in the cab. I compared it to this, and I still kept this car. I sold the truck for a profit, and then I still kept this car. So that says a lot about the space on the inside, and I really do use it. I put it to use all the time. Okay, another aspect of the interior of this car that kind of looks good at the outset, but in practice is not the best choice, is this kind of piano black plastic that they have around the border of the screens and that they have in your center console here. It scratches really easily. It shows marks. You spill a drop of water on it, you get the minerals left over that have dried there. You know, a drip of coffee shows up. It's super shiny. It looks nice when it's spotless, when it's super clean, but keeping it that way seems to be something that's going to be kind of hard. It especially seems vulnerable to scratches. If you let keys drift over it and whatever, it's definitely going to mark it up. In order to keep it looking nice, and even if you have scratches, the best thing you could probably do is use a microfiber towel to keep it wiped off, to keep all of this wiped off, because it shows dust, it shows debris, it shows those scratches, it shows all of that pretty easily. Frankly, I'm not a fan of the black. I do, like I said, I like the way it looks, but in practice, it's not very practical. It's gonna get beat up over the 5-10 years of this car. Things happen, even if you're a careful person. Like, I take care of this car, I clean it out, I try not to have a whole bunch of dirty stuff in here that could scratch it up or get mud all over the place, but things happen, and that stuff is going to show scratches. All right, now we are on the interstate. We are driving at 72 miles per hour on the Dan Ryan Expressway just outside of Chicago. And I want you guys to listen. I don't know. What does it sound like? I think what I will do is put this video clip of me driving without talking. I'm going to show the decibel meter in my video editing or audio editing software, and I'm going to compare that to me driving down a city street, not talking, and then we'll see the difference, and then hopefully you can maybe hear the difference. So let's go ahead and start that now. because we're on the highway, it's probably fitting to talk about the gas mileage on the highway with the hybrid. Now, hybrids are not going to drastically outperform a conventional car in terms of their gas mileage on the interstate, and that's because you're not going to be charging the battery as much, but you can still charge it based on your driving style. So I'll talk a little bit about that, but generally speaking, especially on longer trips, and if you're using the cruise control, your highway gas mileage is going to suffer. However, that doesn't have to be the rule. It is still possible for you to get good gas mileage on the interstate, especially if you're driving around a major city like Chicago. Even when you're on the interstate, it's not so constant, right? Your speed doesn't remain 72. If you're using your cruise control on the Dan Ryan and you're not touching it every 30 seconds, like, I'm actually proud of you. Like that, I don't know how in the world you could possibly manage that because there's so many cars braking, accelerating, cutting in, people driving like crazy assholes. In this kind of environment, this car actually excels because when you're taking your foot off the gas, it's charging up the battery for the hybrid system. So the more that you do that, the more that you alternate between accelerating and letting off, accelerating, letting off, it's actually going to charge and give you more charge that you can use in electric mode. And it does add up on a 30-mile journey. You know, you're using your electric mode quite a bit if you are learning how to manage it. I've had people comment on my previous videos, oh, accelerating is a very inefficient way to get the battery to charge, especially if you just let off afterwards. And that may be true, but let's look at our RPMs while we're driving. So when I am going, like, let's say 72, I'm right at like 2.1 RPMs, 2.0 RPMs, and I can get up to 74, 75 without actually going over 2.3 or even touching 2.3 sometimes. If I'm doing my accelerating very gradually and very slowly, you're not going to see huge differences in your RPMs. And so you're not using that much extra gas in order to let off the system and charge it up a bit. So when I put my foot back down on the gas, I'm not shooting the RPMs up to catch up because I slowed down so significantly that I need to accelerate again. And one of my dominant strategies when it comes to increasing the fuel efficiency of this car is getting up to a little bit higher speed than I actually need to go. If I want to go like 72, let's say I get up to 75, 76, then I let off the gas. That engages the hybrid system, and then I can cruise along at 0.0 RPMs because I'm utilizing the electric system. And when you do this multiple times over the course of a long journey and allow your battery to get up to charge before you do it, you're really going to save quite a bit of internal combustion engine time. You're going to be using that electric a lot more. But again, this really only applies if you're not using the cruise control and if you're willing to kind of vary your speed a little bit, which in certain situations may make the drivers behind you a little bit irritated. But when there's heavier traffic, like I experience every day here in Chicago, that's really not one of my prime considerations. I'm just trying to milk every last mile per gallon out of this car. And so, speaking of which, when you're on this kind of interstate, you're going to be slowing down. There are accidents, this and that. When you're in a traffic situation where it's stop and go, this car loves it. The gas mileage is absolutely top notch. You're going to get over 40 most of the time, especially if the conditions are right. But there have been many times where it's the middle of the winter. It may not be the coldest day of the winter yet, but 30s to 40s, where I'm still able to get 40 miles per gallon on a commute home where I'm driving probably 80 to 90% interstate, and then the rest of the journey, that 10% being city-oriented driving. I didn't start getting these numbers until about, I would say I've had the car for about a year. I don't know if it has to do with breaking the car in or me just adjusting my driving style, but there have been many instances this winter alone where I was able to get upper 30s, over 40 miles per gallon on a 30-mile trip home, with most of that being interstate. So it is possible. Give this car some time. It's going to work itself in, and it's going to give you very good gas mileage, especially in the warmer summer months. Wow, does this thing love the heat. Another one of my favorite features of this car while I'm on the interstate is the lane centering or the lane assist function. So it's a little button that has two lines and then a steering wheel in the middle. That's on your steering wheel. It's on the bottom right for me. So when you engage that, you're going to actually see a little icon pop up on your dash. It's a green steering wheel. That means that this function is engaged and working. And what this does, it keeps your car in your lane. So you can actually go completely hands-free. You can watch YouTube, you can watch a movie, take a nap. No, just kidding. Don't do any of those things. But it is nice on longer trips when you do have to like open up a water bottle really quickly, get back to the wheel. It's also very nice. It allows you to kind of relax from making those small adjustments when you're on a long road trip. This feature is something that I didn't honestly have any preconceived notions about, but once I had it and once I took some long road trips with it, I don't know if I could drive a car over long distances without this again. It allows you to pay attention and be an active driver, but it keeps you from having to make that 1 centimeter adjustment to the right, that half inch to the left, especially like on days when the wind is blowing. When there's some kind of condition that might keep you from being center in the lane, this thing does a really good job of making sure you're staying there. Now, in spite of me liking this feature so much, it does have a downfall, and I'm not sure if this is ever going to be fixed in a software update, a firmware update, whatever, but when you have the lane centering or the lane assist on and you're in the far right lane, let's say of a two-way highway, and there's an exit ramp where the line ends and kind of veers off to the right, this has a tendency to follow that right turn. It won't do it every time, but some exits definitely affect it more than others. And if you're not paying attention, you don't have your hands on the wheel at all like this, it can definitely shoot right on you, and it's not going to alert you that it's going to turn right on you. So you need to have your hands on the wheel. That's one thing that could definitely be dangerous. Another part of this feature is that it doesn't give you a warning whenever it turns off. It's just that icon on the dash that disappears when it has kind of lost its view of the lane. So as long as you have the green, you're good, but it could really be at any time that it turns off and all of a sudden you start to drift. So if you get a little bit too comfortable and your hands are off the wheel, you're not paying attention, you're doing something else, you might not notice that that feature has disengaged and now you're starting to drift off the road, into a tree, into oncoming traffic, things like that. You do need to be careful. You need to have your hands on the wheel. That's just the reality of it. You're going to be tempted not to, but like I said, in short little bursts, it's okay. Grab your water bottle, grab your napkin, take a bite of your cheeseburger, do whatever, but you need to have your hands on the wheel as much as possible. Okay, just two more things about the interior of this car that may not be on your radar if you're thinking about buying this one or any other car, to be frank, is its lack of a holder for sunglasses up here. Simply doesn't have it. That's a feature that I really like in a car. I never thought about it when I was buying one, but it's something that I miss coming from my old car. Anyway, it's not a deal breaker. Put your sunglasses in the center console, whatever. But it is easier to have them up here and have them protected. Another thing is going to be this. So the visor here is a small consideration as well, but it's something that I really like. It's long, and here, you can do this with it. You can pull it back and stretch it all the way and actually adjust it. So that, to me, is a huge upgrade from most, because when the sun's shining in at a certain angle, a lot of visors aren't going to allow you to slide them back and block it from there. That's one of the small things about this car, one of the small details that they really got right. I don't know why they would leave out the sunglasses holder on the other end, but I gotta give them props for doing that. We are off the interstate now, but I do want to talk about something that comes in handy on the interstate, and that is the acceleration capability of this model of car. This one has a turbo in it. It has a small four-banger in it, but that turbo really does pack a punch. I mean, you put this thing into sports mode and put your foot down on the gas. It may not be the quickest off the line, but let's say you're already going 40, 50 miles an hour. You're going 90 to 100 before you even realize it. There have been multiple instances in this car where my wife or myself was driving and we were going 90 without even trying, without even realizing it. We're on the interstate and I look over, holy crap, we need to slow down a little bit. So that turbo definitely packs a punch. I know I've seen some comments on some of my other videos of people worried about the power of this car, and while I don't use it to like pull a lot of weight, and I certainly don't use it to go 90 to 100 quickly all the time, I really think it has enough acceleration and horsepower to probably suit your needs in most situations. Even when I have a trailer on this, albeit it's a light trailer and I've got kayaks on the back, so it's not a whole lot of weight, if I still want to get up and on it with this, I have no problem doing so. And oftentimes I catch myself going too fast. That's the problem in this car. It's too quiet, it's too smooth, too fast. Okay, moving on, we are going to talk about ride quality. I'll take this with a grain of salt because I haven't driven a ton of cars in my life. Prior to this car, I've only had two, Honda Accord, and then, like I said, a Mazda CX-5. The suspension on this car is softer than most cars that I've driven, and my previous cars, but including some other cars, you know, family members or significant others, what have you. So I actually do like the softer suspension on this because I'm kind of driving in places that don't have the best roads. Those potholes don't feel like they're going to swallow your soul in this car, whereas in my CX-5, after I replaced the struts, man, they were pretty tight and they did not like big potholes, or at least I didn't like driving over big potholes. So this thing definitely does have a softer suspension. If you're not into into that, this may not be the car for you, but I don't think it's like overly soft. You're not bouncing and bouncing after a bump or going over a hill. To me, it does a really good job of kind of absorbing the impact and getting back to its original position without you noticing it too much. So my thoughts on the suspension overall: softer ride, handles turns well, does not feel tippy at all. I really like the way really it performs in just about all conditions. One thing you may notice, however, when you're driving this car, especially if you're coming from a traditional vehicle, not a hybrid, the braking is going to feel a little bit different, and that has to do with the braking system engaging and sending that energy to the hybrid system. But it just doesn't brake the same as a normal car, so you do have to get used to that. The brakes have a tendency to grab in certain positions a little more when you're engaging the brake pedal, but you'll soon figure that out, and you'll adjust your braking to give you maximum energy capture and also stop at an appropriate time. So that's just something that takes a little bit of experience, and it's, again, not something that takes away from your driving experience, just something you need to be aware of before you get this car. So moving on to the safety features of this car, I do have one major complaint. Kia, why would you make people pay for extra safety? It should be a standard to include blind spot sensors on the mirrors. Why have you not done that? It's only on the next trim up. That is the dumbest decision I think you could make. Do not make people pay for safety. Come on, that is something that's easy to install. Frankly, that's a choice in poor taste, in my opinion. Some of the things that make up for that missing safety feature would definitely be the anti-collision assistant. I don't know what it's called exactly, but it stops you before you rear end the person in front of you. So this is only really engaged on me one time, and it had to do with somebody stopping quickly in front of me. I was trying to change lanes. I looked over to the right for 1 second too long. I probably would have rear-ended them if it wasn't for that feature. It pushes down on the brakes for you, and it stops you in your tracks. Now, I was only going 5 to 10 miles an hour tops. I don't know what it would look like at higher speeds, but it's something that you can definitely keep in the back of your mind. It definitely puts you at ease knowing that this car is going to do everything it can to keep you out of a collision. So this car also warns you if you're coming up on a car too fast and you're not braking, and you're going to get not only a beep, but also something red on your dash, basically telling you that you're in a dangerous state if you continue on, so you need to either slow down or alter your position. Now, it also has like anti-collision sensors in the back of the car. When you are reversing, it's going to tell you if you're too close to something on like your rear right or your rear left or straight behind you, and it's actually going to show you on your dash what you're very close to. So that's a good way if you're backing up, even though you do have the rear camera, to kind of keep your butt out of harm's way. So to wrap this up, I'm going to answer a question that many of you probably have on your mind, which is, after 50,000 miles, have you had any problems with this car? And I first want to highlight the warranty that comes with this. I bought this new, so it's a 10-year, 100,000, or 5 or 10-year, 100,000 mile warranty. I'm going to get to the 100,000 miles well before any time limit, so that's probably going to happen That's probably going to happen for me after another year and a half, but at this point, I can show you on one hand the amount of problems that I've had with this car. 0. I've had no problems with the suspension, no problems with the brakes, no problem with any of the electrical systems, and I've done some DIY work. I've installed an inverter, put on a trailer hitch. There has been nothing that has gone wrong with this car. Now, I do want to say that I got one of the first 2023 Kia Sportage hybrids coming to the United States in the first batch. I got this car in June of 2022. It's seen all kinds of driving conditions. It's seen a lot of miles, and really I don't have any negative things to say about it. Overall, it's been a very dependable, very comfortable, and very efficient car to use for my purposes. Again, I don't do anything too crazy, but I do use a trailer. I have this packed full of cargo. I do put a lot of miles on it. I'm probably a little bit of an outlier when it comes to the amount of miles that I've driven on this, the amount of different road conditions I've put this car through. I've driven it out in the middle of a bean field when I go hunting. I've put thousands and thousands of miles on it with the trailer, driven tons of miles on interstates and highways all over the country. But on top of that, I have to drive this through the mean streets of Chicago, and it's done just fine. So if I had to give this car a rating out of 10, I'm going to give it a solid 8.5 or 9 for my purposes. I really like this car. I see see myself being in it for quite a long time, as long as there are no major issues. Nothing has popped up at this point. This has been my non-biased review of the 2023 Kia Sportage Hybrid. Again, nobody is paying me to say these things. I don't have a bunch of fancy B-roll that I'm going to use to try to sell you this car, and I'm certainly not getting this car as a loaner. I paid for this with my hard-earned money, so if things were going wrong, trust me, I would tell you. I'd be the first to criticize this car, and while I do have a few small criticisms, I generally think this is a very reliable vehicle. This is my first hybrid. I really love it, and frankly, I recommend it to anybody interested in buying this car, or I want to inspire at least a little bit of confidence in people who have bought this car and just want to know a little bit more about it. These are the things that I've learned after 50,000 miles. Hopefully this helped you. Thanks for tuning in. Check out the other videos in my Kia Sportage playlist. If you're into DIY, use all my links, blah, blah, blah. See you next time.